Hello and welcome to another model building workshop. I'm Mr. Allen, coming to you from Providence, Rhode Island from my basement workshop, doing this on behalf of the community libraries of Providence. If you're in the area, stop by and see what's going on at the community library of Providence near you. So today we're going to be talking about the M5A1 US light tank, the kit from Tamiya, or Tamiya, never know how to pronounce that. So the M5 light tank is an improvement on the old M3. So here's an old, the old M3 Stuart model, also by Tamiya, or Tamiya. This is the original kit. There is a newer M3 kit out that has some differences, mainly in the cupola here. It has a different cupola, or it actually has no cupola and different turret hatches, different design. So that kit is out now. Been out for a little while now, and that should be a lot of fun to build. So this is the original M3 tank, the light tank, and the M5 look like this. And I have a couple of examples here. So you'll notice there's a number of changes on the M5, notably this front plate, which is angled and not stepped like the M3. So this is designed to increase the armor protection. And then I've got another one here that I've been working on. And you're going to notice both of these have the hedgerow clearing device on the front, which I think is mentioned in the instructions. Let's take a look, shall we? As a standard Tamiya instruction sheet. Let's see if it mentions it. No, it shows it there. Dun, dun, dun. Not really, but I think it's the... that's what it's for. It's a device that's designed to get under the hedgerows in Normandy and be able to push the brush out of the way so that the tanks could move through the hedgerows easier, because they were killing grounds for American and British tanks, because these hedges made it almost impossible to move around through the French countryside, and the Germans were using these as like good ambush zones. So an American soldier saw all of the German anti-tank barricades sitting on the beaches of Normandy and decided to cut them up and weld them into this design to create this lifting device, which would take the hedges out of the way. Anyway, so the M5 is an upgrade to the M3, as I just said, and one of the according to instructions here, one of the prime reasons was the M3 was designed around a Continental W670 7-cylinder gasoline engine, and the supply of these engines was getting to be limited because the aircraft production required that engine, and at the time aircraft production was more of a priority. This is early in the war, so airplanes became more of a priority, over the tanks. So Cadillac came up with a design where they mated two 8-cylinder Cadillac car engines together, put them, and then mounted them into the hull of the tank, and created a bit of a difference where you've got this bump up in the back to fit those engines. But what it did is it gave a much improved ride, kind of smooth, like a luxury car that Cadillac would build. At least that's what it says here. But I'm assuming, from what I've heard about the Stuart tanks, and that it must have been a pretty good ride, because the M3 had already had the nickname, even though it had a different engine, of being the honey to the British, because they thought it was a very nice riding and easy to operate tank. The M5 apparently carried on some of that tradition even with the new engines, which just improved it. So Cadillac division of General Motors was working on this, and then let's see, and then they pretty much tested this out and realized everything's working great. And that was late 1941. So production began in 42. Yeah, February 42, and 2 Cadillac plants were working on building the M5s by the summer of 42. And then when the M3 Stuart tank ceased production in 43, those companies then took over, like American Car and Foundry and Massey Harris, which is saying here, began building the M5 also. So a couple other differences: that the M5 had a turret basket and a gyro stabilizer for the 37mm gun, and the British called this the Stuart Mark 6. So that's a very quick breakdown. So this is a light tank, and it's centered around a 37mm gun and a pair of machine guns. The M3 originally had the same 37mm gun and a coaxial machine gun, a 30 cal up here, and it had 3 machine guns down here, which these were quickly abandoned as the soldiers, inside the tank, the crew, really needed more space to store things. So these sponson mounted type machine guns were omitted, for storage space. So if you think about the time, we're talking, 41, 42, when these things were in production. So light tanks like these still had a role in the battlefield at that point in time. And, I got some of the primary competition, I guess, that these would have confronted, like, the Japanese Type 95 Hago light tank, which is another light tank armed with a 37mm gun. So this would have been one opponent for the M5 and the M3. Another would have been the Panzer II that we see here. This is the Panzer II F. This is one of the last of the Panzer II. Well, unless you count the J and the Lynx, which are totally different machines. But Panzer II F here, and then another common foe of the M5 and the M3 would have been the M1340 or M1441. It's still kind of vague as to what this kit actually depicts. This is a Tamiya kit, and the Italia one is similar. The only difference is that the Italian tank had a 47mm cannon, which is slightly stronger than the 37mm gun of the M3 and M5 series. Although the armor plating wasn't particularly good on this. So the 37mm gun was certainly effective against all of these opponents and some other vehicles as well. In fact, both M3 and M5, they ceased being frontline vehicles in Europe as far as tank versus tank combat, probably by the early 43, I'm guessing. Yeah, after Operation Torch and then North Africa campaign ended. So these M3 and M5 light tanks, the Stuarts, were then relegated to like reconnaissance and scouting jobs instead of main tank versus tank fighting. Although in the Pacific, these were still very effective against any Japanese tanks, not just the the Type 95 Hago, but they were good against the Type 97s and some of the later SP guns and so forth that came out that the Japanese had, because Japanese armor tended to be thinner, so the 37mm gun was still quite valid. So we have 2 versions of it that I built here, although both are pretty much an olive drab. One's a slightly lighter shade. I've got this one with some extra gear on it. I've got the figure, which I think is a pretty fun figure, in a very action-packed pose there, manning the 30 cal. Kind of a fun idea. I liked how that works. And this one here, which I did more recently. Well, technically still working on this one. Got some touch-ups to do. In a darker shade of olive. Again, these are Tamiya kits, and they're a lot of fun to put together. Usually headache-free. And let's look at this instruction a little bit more, this sheet. Typical fashion, they have the decal placement option and painting guide here. Oh, these are the exact same vehicles. No, they're not. Different ones here. One's a Victory, which is that one. So there's a couple of options here. Although it doesn't show the other option on the... Oh, yes, it does. Up here you see there's two different options. Again, assembly is pretty straightforward and simple. Not much to it. You've got the typical American suspension system, kind of with a scissors suspension sort of idea. Pretty straightforward and very similar to the M3 in that regard. Kind of basic turret assembly. You've got some grousers you can put on the side of the turret, which adds to the color and effect of the model. Makes it look a little more interesting having some of those on there. And grousers basically were these metal pieces you could add to the tracks to give it a little more traction in rough terrain. You would put these on the treads, because right now we're looking at just the standard rubber shoed version, which is great for roads, but if you needed something to grip better, you had these grousers that you could clamp on to make a better grip. So in the New England area, there are some of these tanks around. The American Heritage Museum's got one of these. So sometimes you see these out. Sometimes you even see them in a parade. So it's kind of nice that we've got these around. And if you notice, you even have, if you lift the hatches open, they give you the periscopes, which is a nice added detail. This has typical rubber band style tracks, but they work pretty well in a model like this one, where it's got the rubber shoes on the track anyway, and you have the armor skirt, and they fit pretty well. They look good. And in a tank like this one, there wouldn't be a whole lot of sag on the tracks anyway. So the rubber track really isn't a detraction for those of you out there who like really authentic looking treads. These aren't bad at all for the rubber band. Not at all. So that's a quick look at the M5 tank. This kit comes in and out of production. And sometimes, I think the latest version of this comes with some more figures. So these tend to come and go over the years. You'll see it. And you certainly find a lot of these like on eBay. They're not hard to come by. And again, a fun little kit to build. Interesting tank. Actually, they both are. I think anything in the Stuart line is kind of cool to look at. And of course, it's the whole British line you could do with these as well. And the fun desert colors. And I know the M3 kit from Tamiya had like a Canadian one in green. So there's a lot of different options and things you can do. Anyway, that's the M5. I call this extra stuff on top. It's visually interesting. And a cool, kind of a high-speed light tank. Okay, that's the model building workshop. And we'll see you guys soon on the next episode. Keep on building. Bye now.